Happy Thursday, Smite fans, and welcome to day number 2 of the SPL play-in tournament. Yesterday, we had 4 amazing sets. Nobody got sent home just yet, but we did have some teams move down into the loser's bracket. Some teams move on to the winner's bracket, and they'll have to play the 2 teams that we didn't get to see today. My name is J. Mac Tucker. Joining me for our first set of the day is going to be Gore Miser over here on the desk. And what a set that we get to start with. We finally get to see the ONI Homies, not the ONI Warriors, not yet, potentially. We get to see the ONI Homies play. We get to see the Winter Dogs play today. But we're also going to be sending a couple of teams home.
What are the odds that they qualify and they're like, yeah, so we want to be the Valkyries now?
I was actually just joking with Alfred about that yesterday. I said, wouldn't it be funny if the Warriors make it in, the ONI Homies make it in, and they decide, you know what, let's just go with the Valkyries instead.
Yeah.
That'd be a
Try something new on for size. See what's happening. Wear some onesies.
Change around there. And then what if Ducky's team ends up making, and then they go over to the Warriors instead?
That would actually mess with me.
That would be something completely wild.
This is an illegal conversation now.
Let's take a look at the schedule and see what all we have in store today, and for what we have in store even tomorrow through. ONI Homies versus SAMSARA will be our first match of the day. Winter Dogs and nobody's favorites. And that'll be the last of what we see on the winner's bracket for today. After that, we move on into the lower bracket. Just F6 versus Thunderhead, the Neighborhood versus Reverse Card. 2 of those teams, 1 from each of those sets, will be going home. That'll be the end of their chances to make it into the SPL. And now we get a nice look at the bracket to kind of contextualize how everything looks today. Winner of this first match will move on to play the Fun Havers tomorrow. And then the winner of the next set with the Winter Dogs Nobody's Favorite will move on to play Duck Club. So a lot of big matches that's going to be going through. But the first one we should probably kind of talk about, is probably one of the fan favorites to win the events, and the ONI Homies. I mean, this is a big team, a lot of big names. They've been around for a while, and, well, they were literally in the SPL just a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, the only way that I can excuse if you have no idea what this team is and who this team is if you didn't watch Season 8, in which case I'm going to get on to you for something completely different, because, man, come on.
What were you doing?
What were you doing, right? So, yeah, no, it's Nika, it's Cuvo, it's Dardez, it's Neil, it's Vote. It's the same guys as well as Chuckles with their coach, right? So it's the exact same crew that we got to see throughout all of last year that had, again, some very fantastic games, some really big upsets against some of the top SBL teams, and unfortunately not able to really try and rise above into that top 4 very consistently. It was really trying to find, I want to say, like, their home in the SBL. They were always consistently them, but it never was enough to, like, break forward and really stand out. They didn't get any of the playoffs, unfortunately didn't qualify for Worlds and things like that, so it has been since December since we've seen them, but they're still playing at that level, right? I mean, they were still giving trouble to your Leviathans, your Dragons, your Bolts, et cetera, and so this is a team that, for everybody else in this bracket, you have to be worried about it because they have a year experience as a team like this going up against the best of the best, and put 3 of them together on a different team the year before that, 2 of them on another team that won a world championship that year. Yeah, of course, they have a lot of experience here, and it's going to be a lot to handle for anybody in the entire tournament.
Yeah, I mean, this was a team that came into Season 8, everybody looked and said, this is going to be a powerhouse team, but unfortunately a lot of the team wasn't able to make it over here into the States until very late into the year, so you had the issue of playing with ping, and then they finally got out here. And they immediately start coming out with these 4- and 5-game sets and these best-of-5s that they had to play through. And because of that, they got a lot of practice. They just didn't get quite the practice that they needed in order to close out a lot of these games, close out a lot of these sets. But now they have had some time to get ready. They've had some time to prepare. And we get to talk with one of the long-standing players here in the league, the support for the ONI Homies, Neil Ma. It's good to see you, man. It's been a long time since we've gotten to talk to you. So I guess kind of tell me how the team's been ever since, kind of the fallout at the play-ins.
We've been pretty good. Obviously, not what we wanted following the end of that year, but I think we had a lot of issues just going in, just not being on the practice as long as a lot of the other teams not able to work on a lot of our issues throughout the year, and to try and put everything together in 1 month was really challenging. So having practice for plans, we fixed a lot of those issues. I think we still have a ways to go in a lot of those problems, but at the same time, I think our problems are just going to be resolved with playing together, chemistry things, figuring out how each other want to play, and just given more time. I think obviously with our roster, everyone has the capability. So it's just kind of about putting it together, and we've been doing a really great job in the past few weeks.
Yeah, of course. Well, I hope we're looking forward to seeing what you guys have coming out here today, seeing what you guys have in store for everybody out there. What's kind of your thoughts on the competition so far? You've gotten to see 8 of the 10 teams. The only one we haven't seen outside of you guys has been the Winter Dogs. What's your thoughts so far on our competition?
Everyone's looked really good. It's nice to see some new faces out here. I've been really surprised by some of the teams, and I think that on any given day, any of these teams can beat anybody, right? Upsets are definitely going to happen this weekend. So it's just about respecting your opponent, showing up ready to play, and then I think just doing your own thing.
All right, well, Neil, well, thank you for taking time to stay here for our pregame interview. I'll let you get back with the team. Get ready.
Awesome, thanks.
It's going to be a fun one out here, and I think it's important to what he said here. You know, these are 10 teams out here all trying to compete for the SPL, and the fact that any one of these teams can potentially make an upset. I mean, we've seen it in days past. I mean, probably the biggest shout is, you know, the Armada rival days. I mean, we've even seen, like, Insignum back a few times ago, where it's teams that, here's your expectation. This is the team that should win this, no problem. But you never know what's going to sneak out from some of these underdog teams. You never know what's going to pop out here. So the fact that really anybody can win this competition always makes it exciting.
I'm happy you were able to focus in on his words because I was very distracted by how luscious Neil's hair is. And it just looks really good, man. And
You're not
that's
wrong.
where it is. And again, it does come down to it, like you said. I think there are a lot of teams in this, and as Neil kind of alluded to, there are a lot of teams in this bracket that are going to be able to throw upsets and are going to be able to cause a lot of problems. In fact, yesterday I was giving a lot of teams credit. I was like, if this team doesn't make it, then this is a team that's just going to ruin someone else's chances, right? And that's really what you're looking at is, you know, one bad set for a team like the ONI Homies or the Winter Dogs, the top 2 seeds, all of a sudden they're having to fight through the lower bracket. One bad set down there, and all of a sudden you're not even going to qualify. Things like that really do weigh on them. They still have that luxury, that double elim going in their favor while they're in the top bracket, but that is something that will weigh on your mind.
It's one of those things that, you know, it's like saying it like this seems like it's so large, but all it takes is 4 games to not qualify to the SPL.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the easiest way to contextualize it. You lose 2 sets and you're out. Sure, we have 10 teams. It's double elimination this whole weekend, so it seems like it's such a large thing to happen. But all it takes, again, 2 sets to go down. They're going to be facing off against SAMSARA here, up against the ONI Warriors, a team that had a little bit of a struggle in one of their games yesterday, but were able to clean it up. Games 1 and games 3, specifically kind of looking around players, Shinigami and Jengaru were the ones I had my eye on for the majority of those sets. Shinigami getting constant solo kills, and up against Chekio, a player who really doesn't typically take these, you know, 1v1 matchups, and whenever he does, typically doesn't kind of lose them in that fashion. Shinigami was really putting in some numbers in that duo lane.
Yeah, the duo lane as a whole was really impressive throughout the duration of it. I mean, forcing an Athena ban really early on because of what Privative was able to do. The setup there for Shinigami and Briz was insane. Jengaru had like 3 nuts games on Circuit, and one of those was despite the fact that it was a loss. So you got a lot on that side of the map. I was actually really impressed as well when they group up as a team. It was one of the conversations we had in the draft, was looking at Wangu on the Artio and coming into this fight and thinking, well, Artio, you know, we're used to seeing her be this like absolute menace in team fights, and it never really came to fruition. Meanwhile, this Cerberus would rotate over. You see Snatty get into the fight, and all of a sudden it just snaps clean. The setup, the front line for this team really did, I think, do a lot to open up opportunities for the carries, and as such, we got some really sick KDAs for everybody on the back line. And again, there was like the little slip up in game 2, post-game interview, they say, yeah, I think we were experimenting a little too much there, and things slipped out of their hands. It was a very close but then convincing win in game 1. It was kind of like 10 minutes of close gameplay before they took over. Game 3 was just absolutely in their control the entire time. So this is a team to worry about if you're the ONI Homies.
We saw a lot of highlights kind of alluding to Snatty here, and that's because we're going to be talking to him for our pregame interview, kind of pick his brain a little bit as we talk to him, getting ready to go into the set. Snatty, thanks for standing by for our pregame interview. Kind of talking about the solo lane, we've been seeing kind of a similar meta kind of at the end of Season 8, but we've also been seeing a lot of small individual changes. What's it kind of like adapting to this new solo meta?
Well, it's been a little different. I think Blackthorn getting nerfed, seeing a lot of more Guardians being played, a lot more Breastplate getting buffed. We're just seeing a different type of CC-centered solo lane picks.
Yeah, and kind of tell me about teleport specifically. That seems to have become the most popular item to kind of go back to now. What's it like being back in a teleport meta?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, last time I went to LAN here, that was the meta. It was at the end of Season 6, so it's interesting kind of seeing a repeat of what I remember.
Yeah, kind of a return to old, if you will, here. You guys had a couple of very wild picks over in the support role. I know Privative was going with the Athena early on, then we saw Kabrakan pop out later on. Is that kind of just one of the team dynamics that you have when it comes to your players individually, across the board, is having those kind of, out-of-pocket picks?
Yeah, we pride ourselves in having a lot of versatility. Everybody can play a whole lot of gods. Yesterday was kind of just our warm-up for this set, so we're really looking forward to it.
Well, I wish you the best of luck here up against the ONI Homies. I'll let you get back with the team the way you guys get set up.
All right, thank you.
I like that, having a lot of versatility between the teams, and that's always the most important things, really at all levels of play. You never want to go into a game and you've got 2 to 3 picks only. You know, you don't want to be the team that is known to where you can basically shut them out in the first 3 bans and the first couple of picks out here. So being able to have that versatile god pool, to be able to have that level of diversity, and as they said yesterday, being able to experiment a little even mid-set is always a good kind of mentality and a good strategy to have in these events.
It might be entirely coincidental, but based on what I just heard, I think if Snatty is on land, then it is going to be a teleport meta, which means if they make it into the SPL, that's what we got to look forward to for the entire year, man. I think that it's, again, fun, but realistically, it's going to be interesting to watch how they deal with this, because I think the play style that they're going to have to deal with up against the ONI homies here is going to be very different. You know, this is a team that came from the SOC. When you play against teams from the SCC, you get like that improvement. You see what it's like playing in a competitive setting, but the SPL teams are like, it is almost a next level. Like it unlocks something different, and it's really difficult to put that into words what exactly it is. It's the way they mesh together, it's the way they read the map, the way they farm, the way they split things, that really does coalesce to the point where all of a sudden, you know, you can see them with a 2K gold lead if a team isn't paying enough attention, and we see it against SPL teams even. So this is going to be something that I think will truly test SAMSARA.
And another thing, you know, even talking specifically about the ONI homies as we go into picks and bans for game number 1, is in their time last season in the SPL, all these players had very unique individual picks that really only they or maybe them and one other player were kind of going through. Dardes really like going towards, you know, Hera and Discordia in the mid lane, and those I imagine are probably both pretty strong when it comes to this double flat pen meta. And even in that support role, you know, the kind of the primitive Neilmaw matchup is what I'm going to be looking at. We saw Athena and Kabrakan yesterday out of Priv, kind of the more kind of outlandish ones. But Neilmaw is also known to do things like that. RDO support was something that he used to really love running, not that RDO over into the solo lane that would normally go over to Nika. And then even Kuzenbo is one that always kind of shirks itself back up there.
Yeah, it's like, was Neil, and it was really kind of just Neil. Every now and then it'd be Raffer who would pull out the Kuzenbo. It was not something we got used to seeing. What I like to see, though, is SAMSARA. I think it was in the post-game interview yesterday. It was kind of memed a little bit like, oh, Jengar, you played 3 games of Circuit. Is that just going to be your weekend? And his exact response was, I genuinely hope not. Like he's if he plays it and he does well, then he's happy with it, but he'd like to be able to get some more gods under their belt. But I love this because the most picked god that the Warriors, this team that is now the Oni homies, had last year was playing Heimdall. Yeah, Dave, that's my one, I know. But the second most picked god they had was the Circuit. It's something that Cuvo loved to play. Yeah, like there was a point, and this was like 3/4 of the year, or 3/4 of the way through the year, he had like 10 hours played on just Circuit in the competitive play. Like, not like, oh, he played 10 hours of Circuit playing ranked or whatever. Like, 4 competitive games, he had racked up 10 hours of her. And it had to have been more than that by the end of it. So that's something to be worried about. And really, I think that is one of the links that they can lean on here. Cuvo did not really have the cleanest last year. Admittedly, he didn't have the cleanest last 2 years, but in one of those years, he still ended up winning a world championship, which was wild. So this will be interesting to see if he's going to be able to come back and punch the way that we're used to seeing him from, you know, a few years ago.
Yeah, first few bans coming out, Gilgamesh, Circuit, and Kleena here for SAMSARA. Oni homies will take Amaterasu, Izanami, and Ardio all off the table. Ardio was showing a lot of prowess in that solo lane yesterday. No surprise, same thing with Amaterasu. Make sure to take her off the board. And it's one of those gods, specifically Amaterasu, that was talked a lot about coming into this land. So we had a lot of expectation, and we finally got to see what this god can do with all the changes that have come out here. And the first pick is going to be that Bastet. It's one that kind of got a few bans yesterday, got a pick or two here and there. We didn't really see kind of an explosive performance out of the god like we maybe would have expected to. But this Kabrakan pick is very interesting to me because not only is it taking away, you know, one of Privity's big picks that he had yesterday, but it's also just kind of still leaving a big open question mark out there because now with the Fenrir locked in, Gormizer, I'm not quite sure where these 2 picks are going just yet.
Yeah, I mean, Kabrakan, we've seen one to get aggressive, but we've also seen in the jungle. I will throw it out there. I think Neil played it twice last year. It lost both games. So it's not necessarily something I think that if you throw it over into the solo lane, or sorry, into the duo lane, that it's going to be natural success. But that's the glory of it, right? When you have a meta when in solo where some Guardians are showing up, Kabrakan tends to rear his head over there. We've seen him in the jungle, and specifically only because it's Cuvo, I feel like that's worth mentioning. I think if it was any other jungler, I could just glance over that conversation and deem it useless. But because it's Cuvo, there is a likelihood, at least some possibility out there, that it could get thrown into that area. And he's got decent gank potential, maybe not the same as most assassins. And honestly, going up against Bastet, I don't think that's going to be as clean as they would like it. But it could be a fun thing to see if they do decide to go that route.
Nike and Morrigan locked in for SAMSARA, and that gives the Morgan a couple of nice transformation options best set if you want some long-range damage to try and grab somebody in, or some good close-range damage if you don't even worry about the range of the ultimate. And then Nike has always been a safe, defensive transformation for the Morgan basically as long as Nike has been in the game. But then the Amuzen Cobb gets locked in, and he was one of the most dominant gods that we saw when it came to the World Championship stage. Haven't been seeing him quite as much this tournament, and it seems that the ONI homies want to continue taking shots over here at Privative. They'll ban away the Athena, which looked really good in game number 1, and kind of reminded everybody just how good an Athena can be. And they're going to make sure that they don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think being able to shut down Privative is a huge deal for this entire team. I think getting Neil and Vote in a comfortable position while stripping away the dual lane power from SAMSARA is going to be a lot of what we saw to help alleviate the stresses they were giving Thunderhead yesterday, right? Because it was all in, at least early on, it was all in that Athena, but we got to see Chekio get soloed out a few times, and sometimes it just happens and you're looking real good and you're playing clean, but I think Vote wants to avoid any scenarios where he could potentially get soloed out at all, let alone having to deal with the things like the Athena and the setup that brings. But realistically, it also kind of screams to where they're at, because if this Fenrir or this Cabrakan end up going into support, they're set. They don't have to worry about any of the Guardians. They can just get rid of some of the top picks and make sure that they're comfortable.
I mean, Athena Yamoja banned away the second one here for the Oni homies, and SAMSARA, they banned away Soul, making sure to take away one of the stronger mages, especially the mage hunters out there. And they're going to ban the Khepri because, kind of like you and I, we're not sure where this Cabrakan Fenrir is going, so they're just going to make a safe guess and ban away one more support in taking out Neil Ma specifically in his Khepri. But alongside this Amuzen Cobb, we now get Medusa, who has become one of the better level 1 to 3 kind of boxers in the midst of that lane. She's been seeing a lot of popularity ever since her ever since her buffs, I should say. Definitely not nerfs. Definitely made this god a lot better. And we've been seeing the popularity that she's had. I mean, we saw some play at Worlds, maybe not the highest success, but we've been seeing a lot of priority towards her here.
And this is actually something that we've seen the Warriors do, at least something very similar to this, right? Throw Amuzen Cobb alongside another hunter into the mix and just see what happens. Most of the time it was, hey, we're going to pick AMC. That's going over to Dardas. Like, that's going to probably be mid because it was more successful for them when they were running that during the qualifiers. They could swap them because both of these hunters do well either or. But I do think it was something, I think they had like 3 games or 4 games with him. They won 3 of them during the qualifiers for Worlds, and so they look really good with this pick. The only downside right now to this composition is it is leaning a little more fizz heavy, and so it's going to be a little easier, at least for like these tanks, to be able to build up some itemization against that, especially dealing with 2 auto attackers and Fenrir admittedly who also wants to auto attack a little bit in there. I think it's going to empower some items for SAMSARA that'll help slow that and control that.
Very physical heavy on the side of the Oni homies, and Achilles as the final pick. So 4 physical, 1 magical composition. But one of the benefits of this comp is they do have the Amuzen Cobb. That Stinger does remove some of those physical protections, so kind of gives you a little bit of leniency towards building a little bit of extra physical heavy. But SAMSARA, with their composition, they started with the Bastet, Nike Morgan, and they end out by drafting their dual lane Ganesh and Ho Yi, who, surprisingly, even after the not-so-great SPL season that Ho Yi had last phase, he's been having a really strong success here in the first day of the play-ins.
Sometimes all it takes is a couple of item tweaks, right? And all of a sudden, Hu Yi jumps back up. He was one of the most picked but worst performing gods that we got to see through the last half of last year.
He became the new Zhang Kui.
I felt so bad every time I saw a team lock in Hu Yi because I love playing Hu Yi. I love watching Hu Yi because ricochets are really, really fun. And we had a couple of great highlights, and those were the only Hu Yi highlights that existed in the league because every other game he was getting absolutely demolished. I think here alongside a Ganesh, early on, especially if it's Medusa Fenrir, if it's AMC Fenrir, if it's either of those with a Cabrakan, they're going to have to play it safe. They're going to have to play back a little bit. They might have some clear. They might even be able to get a decent amount of damage in return, but nowhere near the amount that an assassin plus a hunter or a Cabrakan plus a hunter is going to be able to provide. I won't be surprised if Bastet makes her way over there early on to try and at least offset some of that pressure, but realistically, when you lock in Ganesh, you recognize that you're not going to be playing for the first 5 minutes. Like, you are playing for, once you have your ult on, you're looking for team fights, you're looking for those 3v3s, and so I expect this to be a slower start for SAMSARA.
Well, not just that, I mean, the Ganesh, I actually really like the Ganesh into this Cabrakan and Fenrir specifically. I felt they probably could have drafted the Ganesh right after those two because he's great at shutting down probably the most obnoxious parts of their kit core, the Brutalize for Fenrir. Good way to stop it with the Ohm.
Yeah.
And Cabrakan specifically, we saw just how much damage that Tremors are able to do at the first level and how impactful those are. So maybe being able to get that silence is a good way to potentially shut down this Cabrakan right away.
Honestly, I think it will be a good way to create at least a little space, right? Slow them down, stop things from going as awry as they could. Plus, you've got a Morrigan, so all of a sudden, like, I think your power and your capabilities in the middle of a team fight jump up. Typically, at least in this draft, the first thing I think of immediately is, cool, 2 Nikes, 2 huge slows, 2 huge shields. That's going to be obnoxious to deal with if you're the Oni homies. And so it creates a lot of conversation around those transitions. I will throw it out, though, 3/5 of this team was actually the first game they played in the qualifiers, and that looked good for the Oni homies.
Well, we'll see if it works out for them here in game number 1. It's SAMSARA versus the Oni homies for the first set of the day.
SAMSARA started off their week in fantastic fashion with a 3-1 win. Their prize, moving on to
2-1.
face... What?
It's a 2-1 win.
What did I say, 3-1?
Yeah.
I got best of 5s on the mind. A 2-1 win earlier on in the week. Their prize is moving on to face probably the favorites of this entire week, the Oni homies, a team that was the Oni Warriors and are trying to be the Oni Warriors yet again. And with a successful week, will regain that title. Of course, Nika, Cuvo, Fred, Dardez, Neilma, and Vote. This is our first look at them this week, Miff. We were expecting big things.
And you know what? The look that we're getting is one that we've seen plenty of times. The Oni Warriors, now Oni homies, are a squad that are very willing to go towards this quadruple physical style of composition. I think that Dardez essentially says, hey guys, AMC Ultimate shreds defense. We don't need to concern ourselves with magical damage. And legitimately, he's just right. I'm not worried about the Oni homies' ability to scale into the late game. That is generally the issue with these physical stacks, is that physical defense is just incredibly strong, especially with some of these new glyphs available as well. But I think the composition that the Oni homies have come away with, not only the defense shred from AMC, but also the ability to execute with Achilles, should be able to shore up some of those weaknesses.
Nika on Achilles also carries, I think, a little extra weight with it. And we've seen this. I mean, I think back to the Oni Warriors last year, you know, the talks of them having to play on ping for a lot of the year, whether or not they ever really reached that full potential of this roster. But there was still Nika in individual games all year long, just an absolute mountain to deal with. And picks like Achilles, I think, look really good with that style of play. And so Snatty's going to have his hands full. The Nike, great, though, at controlling space and maybe setting up for the rest of the team.
And Nika want to play an aggressive style in this lane right now. He wants to be bullying out. He wants to look for every single invade that he can, because legitimately Achilles is going to get the better end of a lot of these trades, at least throughout the early, because you're able to cancel out the Ren from Nike very easily. But around level 5, things change. As all Nike lanes do, she gets access to a secondary HP bar.
Yep.
And that makes it pretty hard to find these kills or even pressure.
Miff, I think this is going to be a big week for Dardez as well, because, I mean, so much of the conversation around this Oni homies roster last year is that, again, it never felt like they reached that potential. But I think Dardez maybe at the forefront of a lot of that conversation. You look back to like season 7 and that SSG team and Dardez playing out of his mind, and there were glimpses of that last year. But getting that on a consistent basis for this Oni homies team this weekend, let's start there this weekend. Getting that for Dardez on a more consistent basis is going to be a great start. And he was not one last year, and you mentioned this already, to kind of shy away from these styles of picks in the mid lane. But might need a little bit of support from Cuvo Fred on the Cabrakan jungle to get things started.
Yeah, Dardez just wants to be Vote, man. That's all I see. He's just playing Hunters every single time. I think if he could, he would never lock anything from the Mage tab. But the scaling that this affords his team, the ability to go towards early objectives, is going to be incredibly high. It's a style of play that Dardez has been very familiar with for going on 4 or 5 years now, has been very successful on these Hunters in mid. I'm keeping my eyes on the early power curve of the Oni homies. I think they really do have the ability on Gold Fury spawn to just walk over and do it between the auto attack damage that Neilma is bringing with the Seething Howl, double Hunter composition, space control with Cuvo Fred, just the ability to spawn up those walls and make it very hard for any steal potential from SAMSARA. I think it's more so on SAMSARA to try and limit the Oni Warriors throughout the early.
Yeah, let's talk about SAMSARA, because it was a 2-1. I got it right this time. A 2-1 win.
Nice job.
That they got just yesterday. And there were such strong moments. It was like game 1 and game 3 for SAMSARA in that set looked amazing. And then game 2, a little bit of a fumble. But I think Jangaru really stepped up in that set yesterday for the SAMSARA team. And Jangaru gets a pick here in game 1 that's been pretty banned out so far this weekend. We have not seen a lot of Bastet allowed to be played. And so Jangaru, maybe a little extra weight on those shoulders going into this game.
And worth noting that Jengaru is playing on a controller as well. I would not be playing Bastet on controller. If you've got one ability, a line skill shot that you have to land to find value on this pick, it's going to be pretty difficult to do on the sticks. So Jengaru has to work through that, but certainly very capable of doing so. Very talented player on controller himself. I'm keeping my eyes on this Bastet when she's able to head back to base, whether or not she's looking towards that Jotun's ferocity or you're going for maybe that lifesteal style of build as well. I think that we will see Jengaru probably make some rotations towards Dardes very shortly. That's going to be one of the easiest lanes for him to lock down. But there's not a lot of threat for beads from SAMSARA. Briz likely not going to be able to burn off Dardes' beads on his own. Privative might be able to, but Ganesh, again, not really one. You're generally just using Dharmic Pillars from a range to slow down your targets. So Jengaru might be in a situation where he has to burn beads, wait out his cooldown, and then go back in and try and do it all over again.
Good news for Jengaru is there's only 2 sets of beads to deal with right now. One for Dardes, one for Vote. Some CC immunity, of course, for Neoma, the execute from Nika, and that ultimate as well. And so the opportunities for CC immunity there for the Oni homies, but only 2 true sets of beads for SAMSARA to deal with at the moment. I think Privative also had a fantastic set yesterday.
Oh, yes, sir.
Showed some big moments out of that support role. In Ganesh, the style of pick, outside of the meme of the Dharmic Pillars and how much damage it's able to do.
It's like the most damage.
Right, most damage in the game if you build full damage, blah, blah, blah. I think we disproved that at some point,
so
didn't we?
maybe Tremors
Oh,
does
that's
more.
right. Well, we'll see if this game, maybe, if they both build full damage, which they won't. Already Sovereignty for Privative and Spear of Deso for Cuvo Fred. And so Cuvo Fred ahead in the damage department. At any rate, I think this duo lane may be an opportunity for SAMSARA to find some pressure. Neoma and Vote storied, to say the least, in professional Smite, but not without their struggles last year. So maybe the left side of the map is somewhere SAMSARA can take some advantage.
SAMSARA's win condition in the last set was the duo lane. It was Shinigami consistently finding solo kills against his opposition, Privative getting off to a roaring start on these aggressive picks like Athena. But it is a distinct shift up this time, and it's going to be a distinct shift in methodology, I believe, because the Oni homies have got such an aggressive, high kill potential duo lane. You don't want to step up to a Medusa. You don't want to step up to a Fenrir, especially considering Vote's already playing with about a 1-level lead at this point by controlling just the neutral farm on this side of the map. So if SAMSARA is looking to win the exact same way we saw in the last set, it's already starting to slip away slightly. They need to start establishing some pressure over here. It is nice to see, though, Shinigami not shying away from the fight.
Why would you Vote? Well, why would you? Because it's Vote. I'll answer my own question there. Neoma jumps in. Jengaru sends out his ultimate, but the walls are good from Cuvo Fred, who ends up going down first. The Dharmic Pillars are massive, and the silence is in on the other end as well. It's a 2-kill first blood for SAMSARA. The Oni homies are able to grab 1. Jengaru falls for its troubles, but I think he'll take 2 for a death any day.
I wonder why Neil holds on to his relic there. It was just a lack of damage from the Oni homies to not be able to finish off Jengaru quickly enough to walk away. Forces Neoma to sit in the entirety of a Dharmic Pillar's hardest hitting ability in the game. Had he just used the Girdle, I think he would have been fine, or the Frenzy rather. Right. Girdle's like a Season 2 thing.
I mean, Girdle's just like another belt, right? I mean, I think the point stands. If
Is
you're just,
it?
I'm going to say yes, but I could be wrong. I'm going to say you're right, and you're just using a more eloquent word. But at any rate, we're going to get a look back at exactly what happens here in the mid lane. And right when we call his name, when we say Privative's name, it happens. The Dharmic Pillars go down, and this silence was pretty big. And I think a little bit longer, a little bit more HP, just a crumb more, and Jengaru would have been just fine there. And right when we say Privative's got a chance to make an impact, the Ganesh rotates into the mid lane, and it's Jengaru who really benefits here, Myth, from all of it. A double kill early on the Bastet. Now it can really start to set the pace.
It can, and he's likely going to go straight into that Brawler's Beat Stick, even further push that damage to the forefront. Luckily for the Oni homies, they don't expend any of their beads, so Jengaru still, despite landing an ultimate, is not going to be able to find those priority targets as easily. Dardes still pretty safe, Vote very safe as well. But I like this pacing from SAMSARA, Privative rotating out very early on, matching the aggression of Neoma, and even despite all of it, what happened? What? That's SPL macro farm, bro. They've been controlling duo farm. They've been controlling the mid camps, and they're just 2,000 ahead. What?
A couple thousand gold, couple thousand XP. You're right. And I think Gore talked about this on the desk so well, where it's, SAMSARA has made an incredible play in the mid lane. You're able to farm up a couple of kills there, get yourself off to the right foot. But when Gore's talking about not even so much the ONI homies, but just the SPL in general, it'll sneak up on you just like that. I mean, a 2,000 gold lead, 2 levels in the mid lane for Dardes, who's been able to sit back and farm up just fine. Probably where most of the XP gap is everyone else is mostly even. There's also a 2-level lead for Vote.
The ADCs are ahead. Oh no.
The ADCs are ahead, so unfortunate for SAMSARA. But you're right, when you talk about the SPL level of macro play, because this ONI homies roster was there last year, hoping to get there again, it'll sneak up on you, and they'll start to build up a lead. Right around this Gold Fury now, too. You got a lead with the objective Shredders. If you're able to find a good fight here, if you're the ONI homies, that Fury could be under some pressure.
Looks like they might want to go for this red buff invade. Neilma showing some presence, but it's Cuvo Fred in trouble.
Cuvo Fred gets picked up, but he gets dropped right back down, and there's way too much damage for the ONI homies, and not nearly enough for SAMSARA. Jangaru gets his 3rd of the game, and so we're at least evened up here. But Briz, who is already a couple levels behind Dardes, does not want to drop another kill and keep Dardes on the map. This mid lane gap is going to start to grow.
Yeah, somebody has to address Dardes.
3
Somebody
levels now.
needs to head over towards Vote. Shinigami needs some help. Both of these ADCs are largely immobile. AMC doesn't have the greatest self-peel tools. Vote doesn't either on this Medusa, but we haven't seen too many proactive plays from SAMSARA. Sure, Jangaru's sitting 3-1 right now, 2 levels up on Cuvo Fred, but those are reactive plays. He's applying damage when the ONI homies are choosing these engagements, which is why, despite having a kill lead, despite having such an ahead jungler, Experience and Gold are still favoring the ONI homies. They are just controlling every single bit of neutral farm. I don't think a mid camp has gone to SAMSARA yet.
Probably not. The XP would agree with something like that. And, I mean, look, Cuvo Fred, though, has been at the forefront of a lot of the deaths at this point. I say a lot, 2 out of 3.
He's
I guess
W king.
technically I'm right. Yeah, but is that what you expect from a Cabrakan, right? You walk in, you drop your walls, you drop your tremors, you might die, but you've done your damage.
I think so, and we see it reflected in how Cuvo Fred is addressing these fights. He shows up, he starts tremoring, and he doesn't care that Privative has literally slammed him with every single tick of Dharmic Pillars. Cuvo Fred is essentially playing support damage. He's just there to set up for his boys, apply that damage, and late game, eventually, Cabrakan will have one-shot potential, especially considering it's a quadruple physical stack from the ONI homies, so SAMSARA likely not going to be itemizing too much towards magical defense. So Cuvo Fred could just be playing the late game and acting as a support only in this portion.
If we mentioned it earlier on in this game, feels like a lot of this starts or continues to hang on Jangaru, a 2-level lead over Cuvo Fred, 3 kills, all of SAMSARA's kills with this Bastet. You've got Jotun's Wrath already completed, Brawler's Beat Stick there as well. So this Bastet will hurt. If you're able to connect with any of these carries, which Jangaru does not this time, damage will flow. The ONI homies starting to group up just a bit around this Gold Fury, and when your mid and your ADC are 2 and 1 level behind respectively, I'm not sure you're looking for a fight.
No, and take a peek at the builds that the ONI homies have got already. Crusher finished up for Dardes, fully stacked Transcendence. That guy is swinging, has massive burst potential already. And then Vote's finished up his Aussie as well as his Crusher, so there's decent sustain there as well. Lots of threat towards his Gold Fury.
Shinigami goes up, down onto Vote. Vote, what are you doing there? Looking like trying to invade the purple buff, and it's Jangaru with the 4th of the game, or 4th kill of the game. The ONI homies trying to return the favor, but Cuvo Fred gets a 3-man stun, and he'll take 1 kill to go, but it's a double for Jangaru, and this Bastet is rolling. 5 kills in the jungle for SAMSARA.
100% kill participation for Jangaru and 100% kill allocation as well. But despite all of it, the gold hasn't shifted. Dave,
it's still 2,000.
It's still 2K. The experience gaps are still massive. Dardes has maintained
Cuvo that's dying,
3
right?
levels. And Cuvo doesn't care. He doesn't care at all.
Oh no, Execute won't find its way to Briz, but forces out the transformation into the Nike. And this was always a fear, right?
When he stole it.
We have not seen Nika rotate out of lane yet. We haven't gotten a damage check. And this is what Nika will do. He'll just control the right side of the map. If you give him a pick like the Achilles, when that rotation time comes in, you're in for a world of hurt, it feels like, if you're SAMSARA. You could say maybe the same for Snatty. This Rune-Forged Hammer myth has been like the talk of the town. It feels like on a handful of the picks we've seen here this weekend. Maybe that increased damage will help SAMSARA keep up with Neek out of solo.
Yeah, Runeforge is just Blackthorn 2.0. It's a little bit less HP, but your damage output's a lot higher than what we saw at the tail end of Season 8. So I'm a huge fan of this item, and here's where you're going to get that application. It's working.
Let's see if we can kill off Nika. 3-man stun, but Jankaru sidesteps it. Sentinel of Zeus, surely this has got to be a kill. We're throwing out 2 ultimates and a dive onto Nika. There is nothing you can do about that. The Tier 1 tower will go down as well, but the Cold Fury, the ONI Homies is grouped up on left.
And nobody's in any range to respond from this one. That's the age-old classic. Send 3 members to the soul lane. You're probably going to lose out on the Gold Fury. Luckily, the neutral objectives have not been desynced just yet, so
Gold lead's gotten wider.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen. Did you see Nika steal the back camps? Gold Fury goes down low. All right, there we go. Pyromancer, no, it's still,
uptick.
No, it's still pretty bad.
We were at 4K a second ago, and then the Pyro ticks it right back up to about 3,500 experience. Not much better for SAMSARA here. 3,000 experience behind, despite a 2-level lead in the jungle for Jangaru, and that's because a 2 to 3 level lead has been maintained in mid lane, and a 1 to 2 level lead has been maintained between Vote and Shinigami. And you talk about damage checks upon rotation, Smith. Vote has only participated in 1 of these fights so far, was dove on early in the engagement a couple of minutes ago. And so Vote with Crusher, Aussie, and looks like going into the Wind Demon. 2 levels ahead. Haven't quite seen the damage of this Medusa yet.
No, and the second he finishes that crit, it's going to be time to start making those rotations. Again, Shuriken Tier 1 and 2, not incredibly strong stat sticks, not something you really are thinking about as far as your power curve goes. So compare it to what Shinigami's got on the other side. Atalanta's bow already finished up, so you've got a little bit of lifesteal, a little bit of attack speed, a good deal of crit. This could be an opportunity, despite playing in a deficit, where Shinigami can look for some 1v1s. He's got the ability, if he's lucky, to just deal straight up more damage than Vote.
Right. The rotation of those abilities sometimes able to catch you off guard. But Vote, familiar, I would say, Myth, to Hou-Yi in the play style. And that you think he's played Hou-Yi a couple of times?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe once or twice. The grouping of the ONI Homies around the mid lane knocks down the Tier 1 tower. So the first tower of the game for the ONI Homies, as SAMSARA had already gotten the Tier 1 over on the right side of the map. Continued pressure, though, now from the ONI Homies over here on right. Nika not going to let any of these side camps go quietly.
It's actually freaking me out that the ONI Homies aren't playing Smite. These guys are playing like Cookie Clicker or like Adventure Capitalists, just PvEing on the map, collecting farm, collecting money, and eventually they're going to buy up all the land, dude. This is wild. SAMSARA has been getting the better end of a lot of these actual fights, but it hasn't mattered.
Red buff invade is good from Neoma as you'll drop it down. Teleport coming.
Oh, good
here.
ults.
I believe that's Snatty, but Bastet, that's Jangaru who pulls Neoma right back over the red buff wall. But the 5-kill Bastet will not get the kill onto Neoma unless the chase down on the other end is good. Neil jumped on Dharmic Pillars, used through as well. Silence onto Neil, and there will be a kill, and it's Snatty who grabs it. But here's the follow-up, the dive from Briz onto Vote.
Vote trying to stand his ground. Aussie has procced out here, but 2 Nikes, a little bit too many. Jangaru credit for another 6-1 and 2 for SAMSARA's jungler. And meanwhile, on the opposite side of the map, the ONI Homies are still PvEing, Dave. Tier 2 tower going to go down. Gold lead expanded even further off the back of a clean team fight win for SAMSARA.
Can I just say, this is like the most obnoxious style of game
I
to
hate
play.
these
Like
guys.
when I'm playing against the way the ONI Homies are playing right now, it is so annoying because you're like, yeah, we group up, we got a couple of kills, great, right? No, we've lost our entire right side of the map except the Phoenix. We're somehow further behind than we were before we made this nice team fight play just a moment ago. It feels like SAMSARA just can't do right now, you know? Every play they make, and they're being proactive. This is a team that is making plays in the kill department, just hasn't translated to a gold or experience lead just yet. It is all on Jangaru right now. He's got 6 kills. That was a great rotation from Snatty. But you're going to need more on the map to keep you close in gold if you're SAMSARA.
It's just the ONI Homies macro play is just really, really strong at this point. It's calculated risk. The ONI Homies realize that they don't win a fight on the left side of the map, but there's nothing to fight over on the left side of the map. Gold Fury already cleared out, so they don't care if Vote falls down. The main objective is on the right-hand side. That Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower worth so much more than just a couple kills.
Shinigami run at by the Ragnarok beads used on the other end as well as the ultimate, and that is a trade the ONI Homies will happily take on the left side of the map. A slight grouping from the ONI Homies over here on the left. It's because the red buff has been up, Miff, and that's been the name of the game, it feels like, here as of late for this Oni Homies team is group up around the red buff, see what happens. Neomar got pulled back in by Jangaru last time, but this time looking much cleaner. But does Jangaru have eyes for Neomar once again? There is no Ragnarok, so that CC immunity gone without beads, but it looks like Neomar is going to be just fine.
Yeah, he's stolen rather, all of the flowers, so he could just go ahead and head on back and pick up that scepter. Maybe it's going to be Nika who takes that one. So his damage output now a lot higher. Nika, one of the tankiest members of this team at this point, going to be constantly involved.
Another Dharmic Pillars is down, and it's Cuba Fred who is trapped in
Whoa!
place. Walls go down, and Jangaru, the perfect target, is deleted at the beginning of this fight. That's a nice Sentinel of Zeus from Snidey to slow the entirety of the Oni Homies, but the damage has been done. Jangaru, the carry right now, is gone. And now the left side of the map should be as well.
Yeah, that gold bounty had to have been massive, but maybe not as large as the actual Primal Fury proper. We'll see if SAMSARA is able to regroup and put up some form of defense, but not the case. Nobody willing to step forward, nobody willing to even go for that steal attempt. The Oni Homies, they take the fight, they take the objective, they push themselves even further ahead, and this time around SAMSARA, slow on the uptake to get to the Pyromancer. Still should likely be able to take this one out. Shinigami already dropping it down to 50%, but the Oni Homies, I don't think they care about the Pyro. 19.5 minutes in, it's time for the Fire Giant.
That was close from Shinigami. If there wasn't help from the rest of SAMSARA there, that Pyromancer would have had one final swing. All right, so this is Cuba Fred at the beginning of this fight. Oof! And that is it's the pairing with Dardes that just makes that so surprising. The walls go down from Cubo Fred, then Dardes sends everything in that direction. And it is just massive from the Oni Homies in a well-timed fight. And so make no mistake, the kills for SAMSARA have been there. I mean, they're doubling up the Oni Homies, but it's moments like that where you finally see the gold lead come to fruition when the Oni Homies group up and try to take a fight instead of sending a couple to left to knock down those towers, things like that. And now, Myth, a little bit of presence from SAMSARA on the right side of the map. You get the feeling that a Fire Giant might be on the menu.
Dave, just to contextualize this match a little bit.
Yeah, please do.
The Oni Homies side lanes are a combined 0-5.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous considering the amount of lead we're looking at for those side lanes. It's 2 levels up for Vote. We've got only 1 level down for Neomar. Nika has been kind of nursing a 1 to 2 level lead, now equalized with Snatty as they're starting to approach level 20, but now it's time for the Fire. I guess this is the first 5-on-5, true 5-on-5 engagement of the game.
Look out for Neomar's Frenzy. That could be a starter button for a fight or a Fire Giant. Dharmic Pillars good yet again from Privative, separating out this fight.
That's
Sentinel
massive.
Zeus is good at providing the shielding, but Briz will jump on out. It's a double kill for the mid laner. The Oni Homies crumbling. A third right around the corner, being Jangaru all game long, but Briz is the one getting it done in this one, and the Oni Homies crumble.
Nika in some trouble, should be able to escape this one with his life. I'm not sure the same can be said of Dardes, who is isolated, but they're dropped low.
They are dropped low in the back. Dardes staying alive. Nika, the saving grace, is here to play as well. And Dardes survives. What is happening right now? He has sidestepped everything. He's got to be. Snatty has got a little bit more damage. Shinigami is around the backside of the fight as well. And finally, Dardes will die, but he stayed alive a lot longer than he should have. But while Nika is on the map, no Fire Giant is safe. The stun is on the other side, and those health bars will remain low, but they will not reach 0. Neomar respawns, but that's a deicide for SAMSARA around the FG.
Yeah, that fight goes so well for SAMSARA because of the Category 5 Natural Disaster Ultimate from Privative, just locking down every single one of the Oni Homies, applying all of that damage, separating the engagement, creating individual 1v1s. Jangaru's able to chase out on his own, finishes off Vote, I believe it was, or maybe Cuvo Fred, and then from there, Nika wasn't able to get involved. He wasn't able to create that space that his team needed, and instead had to kind of relegate himself to a pseudo-assassin role, just trying to finish off some of these kills. The Oni Homies, they've spent the last 22.5 minutes PvEing. Seems like they forgot how to PvP.
That's right, we got a PvP at some point. It's going to be around the Fire Giant. Nika still 15 seconds away. Does not have the teleport either.
It's a dangerous pull.
And so it'll be a 4 versus 5 for the Oni Homies if SAMSARA commit to it. Slow rotation in from Privative. Can drop those Dharmic Pillars on the Fire Giant to speed up that shred. But with how good they've been placed on the team fights by Privative, you'd love to use it to win another fight here. Suddenly the Oni Homies, they're still in this gold lead, but you're feeling maybe a little shaky.
I'm worried.
After the way that last fight went. So they're going to have to show some face. You do not want to give this one over for free. Neoma pulled back in by Jangaru.
It's a lot.
And it's the Dharmic Pillars on the back end.
One.
But Jangaru grabs the kill anyway. Cubo Fred finds a re-engage, and the trembles are massive. But Cubo Fred not going down without a fight. He will survive on the other end. And now Dardes can re-engage, and the Oni homies will not make the same mistake twice.
SAMSARA get tunnel vision, trying to finish off Cubo Fred, who's able to limp his way out of that engagement very easily. The Oni homies.
Did I say shaky? I didn't mean it.
No, yeah. Were you worried? I wasn't worried.
I wasn't worried. No one was worried.
They just did gold. I wasn't worried.
No, Fire Giant now will get shredded down by the Oni homies. It's a perfect fight. And think about how important it is that Nika and Dardes survived so long in the first Fire Giant fight. That prevented SAMSARA from immediately going to get the FG. The opposite happens here. Everyone dies all at once from SAMSARA except Snatty. And so the Oni homies are able to group up as four because Neomon goes down, get the Fire Giant, and now you got a full 4 minutes to push in. See if you can find yourself a Phoenix and maybe the game.
15 seconds left on Jangaru and Brizz's respawn. So tier 2 tower, that should be pretty easy to pick on up. Maybe we see the Oni homies go ahead, strip the jungle, fall back, clear out that Gold Fury, and then regroup in the duo lane. They've got so much time to play with this Fire Giant that legitimately I don't think they can do any wrong at this point. Worth noting that Neoma will not be benefiting from that buff, so no HP 5, no MP 5 going his way, which is going to kind of shift the attention to Nika to act as the primary tank on the siege. And that siege is not going to be easy. SAMSARA have been winning out in the majority of team fights. We're still looking at a 14-9 slash line. But the execution of their team fight in their own Phoenix is so much easier. Privative is going to have a much easier time finding massive impact Dharmic Pillars, not that he's been struggling to do so whatsoever. Shinigami's space control with the ultimate is going to be very hard for the Oni homies to fight through, as well as now Briz has an easier time working his way into the back line. He's been struggling to get through Dardes's Honey with his stealth. Now you can kind of play around the side, try and at least find these 1v1s, immediately transform into Snatty, and then act as that disruption factor for the rest of your team. So the Oni homies, despite playing with a massive gold lead, which they have been doing so for the entirety of this game,
somehow,
and Fire Giant on 4 members, I don't think we can count out SAMSARA just yet.
No, SAMSARA at every turn of this game in the fight department, except for this last Fire Giant fight, SAMSARA have shown us that this team has the ability to fight in a coordinated manner. There's just that one fight that goes wrong, but the gold lead is really what separates things and makes this feel almost insurmountable. As the Oni homies will group up. Looks like a bit of a flex rotation here, 4-1 as Nika will head his way on over into the mid lane. We'll see where Cubo Fred goes. Has the blink ready to go, and so that sudden engage, the wall, the tremors, all of that will be there for Cubo Fred if he wants to find the backline. Jangaru's taking a lot of damage here. It's a good start to the fight for the Oni homies as Privative will send the Dharmic Pillars down and send the Oni homies back.
Yeah, that's every single relic from Neoma expended, so all that support relic already dropped. The Bracer dropped down, so that's acting as a little bit of an additional damage, and the Bracer.
Briz with the stun has found Neoma, and it's Snatty who gets the first, but it's immediate return kill from Cubo Fred, so a 1-for-1 trade, but it's support from mid. The Oni homies okay with that trade for the time being, and now Nika can start to walk into the base. The execute will not be needed because Cubo Fred has got 2. Volt will add 1 as well. Shinigami heads back to the fountain, and the Oni homies group up on the Titan, and they will take the first game.
That Titan is melting slowly. Seems like the Oni homies are trying to tie up the KDs.
They will take the first game.
They will take it, and they don't tie up the KDs, 15-13. But it's the Oni homies walking away with a victory. It's hard to say. What do you do different there? Because you went out on every single team fight throughout the early. Is it worth saying? Like, does SAMSARA's coach go back there and say, hey guys, we just gotta farm better? Just simply farm better? Like, that's hard.
I mean, and I want to shift the focus as well to the Oni homies because it's a difficult regrouping for SAMSARA. But for the Oni homies, are you comfortable with that win? I mean, because it's the gold lead all game long that rolls you there, and that's worth everything, obviously. I mean, they win, and by the end, it's convincing. Are you feeling like there were some stumbles, though, for this Oni homies team that maybe kept things a little more interesting than it needed to be?
There was only one mistake where I was thinking to myself, oh my god, SAMSARA is going to do it. Like, they're going to do it. They're going to take out the Oni homies. And it was the fight around the Fire Giant. Yeah. That's one stumble. But even then, individual play, individual talent from Nika was able to slow down SAMSARA enough to make sure that the Fire Giant doesn't go their way. Bought a lot of time for his team to respawn. And then we saw what happened when the Oni homies focused back up in that neutral fight. Secondary Fire Giant fight. very clean.
Well, it's the favorites of the week, and the Oni homies making maybe one mistake in their first game back, knocking off some rust. You can't blame them. Oni homies take game number 1. Game number 2 coming up after this.
Welcome back, everybody. Game number 1 done between the ONI homies and SAMSARA. And what more can I say? I mean, SAMSARA was doing everything right for like the entire first half of the game. They were winning every fight that they were going to. They were controlling objectives fairly well. The fact is just that the ONI homies were just farming more, and every fight that didn't go their way didn't matter because, Gord, they were up like 2,000 plus gold at just about every stage of the game.
Yeah, early on, it was almost a blink and you miss it. Like, you blink early on, there's a 2K gold lead all of a sudden, and then it starts going a little bit further on, things like that. It was really interesting to watch, and it's going to be something that I think you have to adapt to if you're SAMSARA. It's not easy to deal with.
Yeah, and one thing that maybe SAMSARA could use, and maybe some of you at home can use to help you keep focused, to maybe stay a little bit hydrated. If you go over to shop.smiteproleague.com, we are selling some very nice water bottles that you can pick up for yourself. Make sure that you stay hydrated. We got ones with the lightning bolts on them. We've got some with the Smite Pro League logo. And we've also got one with all of the team names on. So you got a few that you can pick from. Make sure to grab one. They're all nice and they're very convenient to have. And you know, you can never have too many water bottles, Gore. I mean, I've got like I think 6 of them probably sitting in my cabinet right now.
It's funny you said that because I was thinking the same thing where I'm like, damn, I don't know. I have like 6 water bottles and I definitely don't use all of them. But admittedly, the one like they're pretty. I like having them. They look really nice. There's one that's actually a really nice water bottle I know I should use, and yet I actively don't, and I feel bad about that.
Yeah, they're definitely nice, and you always definitely pick a single favorite out of all of them that you only use that one, and the other ones are only...
I use it till it
breaks.
breaks.
If that one basically breaks, you lose it, or it gets like super dirty and you just forget to clean it at one point. But one thing for SAMSARA, maybe kind of cleaning up their mid game, kind of cleaning up their farm game more than anything else, because that seemed to be the real only difference between them was just the farming. I mean, they had the fights down. In fact, they were basically one fight away from taking down the ONI homies. They had a fantastic fight around that fire giant, but that was really the only moment where they really got ahead of them.
That's the way I'm really looking at this, is when you watch anything that the homies were able to accumulate. I mean, at this point, they're 5K gold up, right? 21 minutes in, and they're down by 8 kills, right? Or 7 kills. It really does make a huge difference in a lot of these fights, where just having that amount of lead, you get those items. It was a ton of experience as well. I mean, Dardez and Vote were up by 2 levels, I think, perpetually the entire game. And despite the fact that SAMSARA's frontline and everybody was playing out of their minds, I think the frontline specifically has to be shouted out, though, because Jengaru and Privative were absolutely nuts this game. But realistically, it just came down to this unfortunate problem for them that you're always fighting uphill because the farm is on the other side. But it is exactly like what you said. That one fight, that very last fight that the Warriors win around the Fire Giant pit, when they get the FG, if that goes the way of SAMSARA, they probably win this game. Or at least they get a lot of gold from towers that equalize things out, and they're able to make a much more equalized battle out of it. I think now you have to worry about the early game, because yes, you got a lot of the kills, but you can see that that's not the end-all be-all in Smite, and that's something that they have to worry about going into every single experience camp, all the gold that they accumulate, and something that they need to pay attention to earlier to make sure that it doesn't get as out of hand as it did.
I mean, fighting against the ONI homies in this first game was just an uphill battle from the very beginning. I mean, they went down. I mean, SAMSARA got the first blood. They got the double kill first blood, speaking on to that for Jengaru. Then they ended up losing 1. And even after getting first blood, they were still down like 1,500 gold. So by the time the fighting even happened, SAMSARA was already down. ONI homies just with great macro play across the board. Dardez in that mid lane specifically, top of the damage charts for his team. Top of the farm as well. I mean, with the 634 GPM that he's got here, I mean, yes, that's very impressive. But at all points of the game, up until he literally could not be more than like 3 levels ahead, he was basically up 3 levels against his opposition in the mid lane. Dart is getting constant farm, constant pressure, and constant damage in this mid lane.
If those KDAs were up there and it didn't have defeat and victory, you'd think SAMSARA won this game.
Oh, 100%.
Just strictly because everything about their KDAs looked better. Their damage numbers, like you said, maybe not quite as impressive as what specifically Dardez was outputting, but like pretty solid. And all in all, it looks like that is a winning team's kill numbers ultimately, and yet it just unfortunately falls through. 634 GPM. Like, I don't get to talk about GPM a lot because most of the time it's really not that interesting, but like anything 600 and up is nuts. That is really good for anybody to be able to achieve. And the fact that 4 members of the ONI homies had that number is insanely impressive from them, because the average that you're going to see is somewhere in like the 530s, 550s, maybe like upper 500s if it's like a really good game. But, you know, supports are going to hover in the very high 490s. and then everybody else is somewhere in that mid 500 range. Anything in the 600s means that you are farming way too well and that the other team needs to adapt to that immediately, or else they are not going to have a chance in terms of items. You're just always going to be ahead.
Well, as we jump into picks and bans in game number 2, SAMSARA do like to take second pick, and one of those first things that they want to ban away is that problem of the mid lane. They're going to take the Amuzen Cob away from Dardes, as well as just the Gilgamesh, a very safe ban. And then Oni Homies, they're going to take away 2 big frontline Guardians in the RDO and the Emoja.
But here's the question. Does SAMSARA ban the Amaterasu? I think, as the Oni Homies' first pick, with Nika's win rate and history on this god, and her in the meta, I think you lock that in immediately if it's available to you.
I'm sitting here, I've got the button ready to slap. If I'm Nika and I do see an Amaterasu open, I'm slapping that button immediately, but it does get banned away, and instead it will be Izanami picked up, something that Shinigami performed on well yesterday, something that got banned out earlier on in game number 1, but will now make its way up to the forefront. Oni Homies picked that up as a first pick. What a world that we're in, where Izanami now is the first pick. I feel like I say that about every kind of new meta, like, man, what a world where Amuzen Cob is a first pick. What a world where Olaron is a first pick. It seems to always kind of be these hunters that I'm so curious as about, that we kind of see as this top priority, but it will be Izanami first locked in.
You either have like 2 or 3 Guardians that are like the top picks, like 1 or 2 mages, or some weird smattering of hunters that just comes through. And it's never the ones you expect. I mean, we even saw like Sylvanas first pick a couple of times over the not last few months, but prior to that at the end of Season 8. Things that are interesting there. I think it's really fun to watch how this is going to shake out, though. SAMSARA, if you go back and look at that game, I think Snatty had a really good game. I think Privative had a great game for a Ganesh. And I think that you got Jengaru having a very solid performance, finding a lot of kills, doing a lot in terms of the jungle. Really, the problem is the experience and the gold game that happened in mid and in the carry position got a 2-level to 3-level lead almost instantly, and it kind of got even worse than that for some parts of it. And if you are Briz here, or if you're Shinigami, you really have to worry about that coming into this. You have to think more about your farm, more about your presence in lane, because they weren't allowed to essentially do as much damage as their opponent. They just didn't have the items to keep up. And so I think that is going to be the biggest change for them. Otherwise, their playstyle was very solid. They got a lot of kills. It's just going to be that macro play on the map.
You see Cerberus and Ho Yi locked in on the side of SAMSARA for their first 2 right after the Izanami pick. So we already do have both of our hunters locked in. Ho Yi been seeing a lot of priority, specifically this time around in this event. And then Bastet, which worked so well for Jengaru last game. I mean, it's not often that we open up a game with, like a 6-0 Bastet, and then that team ends up losing somehow at the end of it. It's absolutely mind-blowing, the start that Jengaru and his team were able to get out here, the kills they were able to pick up. But now the Oni Homies and Cuvo Fred specifically going to take his opportunity to grab that god. And one more time, Neil Ma maybe looking to take this Fenrir back over into the support role.
Honestly, I'm a little worried because, I know that Cerberus is probably going to be solo, but Hu Yi up against Izanami early on, depending on the support you match him with, which admittedly I'm thinking like you need maybe like a Sylvanas to try and keep up with it, but Izanami's clear is already insanely good. Vote and the rest of the Oni Homies had such a huge lead early on already that it feels like the duo lane, at least level experience this game, could get exacerbated really fast, and that's going to be problematic, I think, in the entire grand scheme for this game. Now you add the Bastet, like you had mentioned, alongside that Fenrir. You've got really good dives, so this Ho Yi and potentially this Eset is going to be in trouble for a majority of their team fights. Luckily, Eset, we saw yesterday, really good for self-peel, really good at keeping yourself alive for a little bit longer, and sometimes can even turn things around. I think in team fights between the Ho Yi and the Eset, you could actually have some good damage.
Yeah, I mean, Spirit Ball, Dispel Magic, great tools for the E-set. If you can find one good stun or one good stun placement by Ho Yi, it can turn the tides. Kabrakan and Odin banned out by SAMSARA, Dodgy, and Awilas. So a couple of frontline out of SAMSARA to ban away. A couple of Assassins to be banned away. And this E-set will be going over towards the support role because Thoth ends up getting locked in by SAMSARA. I was literally just about to ask, do we think this E-set goes mid? Because Mark kind of turned me back into an E-set mid believer. For so long, we've seen her success in support. For a short while, we also saw Sino bring success to the god in jungle. But seeing E-set always kind of just comes back to me as being support role. But with Mark's performance yesterday, it kind of made me a believer in the mid. But will not be so. Thoth locked in, and then in response, maybe we're not going to be seeing this Fenrir go over to Neil Ma. Instead, Bacchus locked in alongside Agni.
You know, this feels like the exact kind of draft for the Oni homies to make a pivot specifically to something like an E-set support, where if they had wanted, that could have been Fenrir support if they need it, but they want something that could deal with her a little bit better and maybe control that a little bit better. That being said, this is outlandish. Something is not going where I think it's supposed to go on this side, and it's either... So, hold on.
Bastet or Fenrir solo?
No, I was looking at the other side.
Oh, that too.
E-set or Ares jungle, which we have seen both of them, but
wait.
neither really hit home the way that you want it to.
It is just going back to Sino, isn't it? We're going back to
Well,
the...
I was going to say, Sino loves the E-set. Does Sino play Ares in the jungle as well? I know we've seen it a couple of times.
There was a very brief period after Ares got a buff to his Flames where he became a really strong jungler because Flames basically killed a camp by itself. And so I
don't know if it's in... Like, I mean, it got nerfed from, like, that point, but I don't know if it's, like, so nerfed or so different that you couldn't make it work. Like, it might be uncomfortable, but honestly, I prefer it up against a Bacchus in lane. If I'm going to have to choose one of the two, I'd like it to stop the guy from jumping and belly flopping in or stop Izanami from getting away. I think the chains are very helpful over there. But it is worth the conversation that it can exist.
So you were concerned, where's the E-set, where's the Ares going? One of those has got to be jungle, one's got to be support. I'm probably...
Watch it be like a Ho-Yi jungle Thoth carry or something wild. It'll
Why
be
would
a
you put
Thoth
that evil?
E-set duo lane.
You know what? I can't say don't put that evil out there. We already had a Sylvanas mid, and that was in day one, like set 1 or 2 of the entire weekend. So we've already had some nonsense go out there. But now I'm looking back over at the other side for the Oni homies, and we've got Fenrir and Bastet to kind of pick and choose between which solo that we go here.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering which of the two Nika would rather play, because I believe it was Finoke who played the Bastet solo at one point. But the Fenrir solo is something that we haven't really seen in quite some time, Gormaz.
And honestly, it's something that we could probably see work, and I don't think it would have necessarily a lot of trouble here, although I don't know if it really beats out like a Cerberus in the solo lane. But I prefer the Bastet over there in this, and not necessarily because I think Nika will play it better, has a better matchup. It's more because I like Cuvo's Fenrir a lot more than I think I like most of Cuvo's Any Gods, realistically. So I think this would be a good matchup for him in the jungle. Get him a little bit more hands-on early on. It took him a little while on that Cabrakan to really start to feel some of that impact. So I'd like to see him pilot that Fenrir and just see whatever this hodgepodge is on the other side find something sort of successful.
Well, let's delay no further and see where all these gods are lining up here in game number 2. Let's throw it over to Dulcet and Mifflin to bring the action.
The Oni homies in game 1, well, they buy their time, lose some kills early on, but build up that gold lead to the point where it felt insurmountable by the end. Dulcet, Mifflin, and Doug bringing the game number 2. And if it's anything like what we saw in game 1, the Oni homies should be cruising on to the next round of this tournament. But Miff, SAMSARA showed signs of life, and that's somehow an understatement. SAMSARA showed a real fight back in game number 1. Jangaru was at the forefront of all of the kills on that Bastet. Privative, I think, had a fantastic game. But this time you give Jangaru the E-set. Is that the same level of playmaking potential, you think, from what we saw in the Bastet?
I suppose so. If you're able to get off to a roaring start, E-set can still control the pace of the game. Having her in the jungle makes it a little bit more versatile on which neutral objectives you're confirming as well. As far as early game damage output and the ability to dislocate targets, I mean, like, I'm not making any news here. It's not as good, I would say.
What?
Look, there's only like
That's
one
news.
guy. There's like one guy that does E-set jungle, and I'm like, yeah, let me see more of that. And his name's Sino. And this is Jangaru. I don't have very much data on him playing this pick. And I would argue that SAMSARA have got a composition holistically that is a lot harder to execute on than the last one that we just saw. You've got a little bit more so ability to fight over the mid camps, which is, I think, where the majority of the Oni homies lead came from. Or the Morgan, not very capable of taking those engagements early on. Thoth a little bit more so, especially with this new early double flat pen style of build. But in the team fight, there are a lot of easy targets for the Oni homies to start looking towards. Early game Privative going to be largely immobile.
What are we doing here? Cuvo Fred ganking the solo lane. Snatty's got the jump, and the stun wasn't there from Cuvo Fred. Might have made things interesting had it been, but Snatty will be just fine for the time being. First totem of coup of the game. We'll head over to the Oni homies. Now, Fenrir Miff, we've seen, plenty of times that it feels like it's been mostly out of support as Snatty will jump away. Bastet, we've seen banned plenty of times and picked already, but it was in the jungle. So now we got Bastet solo for Nika's Jengaru uses the last bit of mana for the stun and needed a little bit more HP. Dardes on board. He's playing a mage this game, and he's got first blood.
I think Jengaru just has to hold on to the Spirit Ball to cancel out the Brutalize. If he doesn't have the silence available, and at level 3 he doesn't, Brutalize does so much damage, you have to respect it.
Oh, man.
Briz also taking a lot of damage. You know, I walked by the ONI homies between these games, and I heard them say, let's just slow down the pace a little bit. And I thought to myself,
yeah,
surely
I don't
not.
believe you.
Surely not. They're not going to do that. And they're not.
Yeah, Myth, they're two-man diving between a tier 1 and a tier 2.
They baited me, bro. I don't know.
See, I don't believe that you actually heard what you...
Bro, I promise
you know what they really said is we need to not slow down. We need
double negatives are hard.
Right, that's
we need
surely
to not slow down.
Because, right.
Okay, got it. So maintain.
No, wait. That means they do need to slow. Oh, no, I messed myself up. Neoma's got to use the beads to jump away. It's privative. Had Neoma chained in place. Right, we need to not slow down. This would have been the... I made it too hard. I made it too difficult. The Oni homies, and just from their draft, is when I started raising my eyebrows at you, Myth, before you and I were even on the cast. I mean, you're playing a Fenrir, a Bastet solo, Neoma on Bacchus, I'm thinking, and an Izanami in lane, I'm thinking there's no way you're trying to slow things down. Maybe the decision-making, right? I mean, they're all, well, I say all over the place. I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, literally on the map in game 1, they're all over the place. And so maybe taking a deep breath and sort of regrouping.
This could be big.
That's what the Oni homies want to do. It's a 2 versus 3 over the horizon as Jengaru makes their way on over to duo, and it is a kill for SAMSARA, and the E-set will put down vote.
Yeah, just the ability to walk into a lane, find that silence so easily, immediately followed up by a stun. The gank potential of E-set is incredibly high, and Jengaru not being forced to use the circle protection there does leave it available to take some fights a little bit later on. But look at this, Dave. Cubo, he's found Briz.
Cubo is in the Samsara side of the map, dash there. And so Briz will live to fight another day, but Cubo Fred forcing this Thoth out of lane. Not been an easy early game for Briz on the Thoth. Hasn't died yet, but Dardes and Cubo Fred have just set up a tent right around mid lane here and have forced Briz out. Already gotten a kill on a Jengaru, and it feels like the center of the map right now under some threat from the Oni homies.
Briz just has a really bad matchup in a Fenrir. Thoth really doesn't have any way to answer that Brutalize, so as long as Cubo Fred is playing nearby, Briz will likely just be wounded for the entirety of this game. It's up to Jengaru and Privative to limit what Cubo's looking for.
Cubo Fred has been on a warpath this game.
This could be
Stygian Torment out of Snatty. Ragnarok there from Cubo Fred. He has dodged out the damage, and they're healing on the other end. But no chance to get out of that one alive. And so Cubo Fred will fall for the second kill this game. Ultimate no good from Nika. And so Snatty jumps on out. But Nika's been pretty obnoxious over in this solo lane as well. It feels like Bastet solo has been able to pressure out Snatty, but this time the blue buff invade Myth that provided, no good, as Cubo Fred falls for the first time.
And take a peek at the experience in the jungle. Jengaru, yet again, 2 games in a row,
Yep.
2 levels up on Cubo Fred. That said, Cubo Fred hasn't been farming. Legitimately, I don't think
he's
it's
done
something
his
he's
fight.
concerned with. He's just fighting, absolutely correct. And Jengaru's been doing a fair bit of fighting himself, more affected kills, more farming on the map, and now feeling very good with the Spear of Desolation pickup as well. I think Cubo Fred would do well to just kind of rest it out a little bit. The rest of his team
slow down.
The rest of his team slow down. I don't know.
Not slow down.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, he needs a minute to farm things up here. Does not go with the Jotun's Wrath first. Brawler's Beat Stick. What Cubo Fred is looking for here. A little sustain on the Samsara, in the Samsara composition. Makes it a worthwhile pickup. Briz seems to agree here. Divine Ruin. So does Dardes. Divine Ruin for both of the mid laners to start off. And so anti-heal, Myth prioritized in a few of the roles here early on. Luckily, it hasn't been a weekend where we've had to discuss healing way too much. Pull in onto Cubo Fred, then a Spirit Ball.
Oh my god.
And then a Final Judgment, and Cubo Fred dies yet again, but Vote from over the wall snags the kill on a Jengaru. Privative running for the hills, but Neoma right on his heels. Down goes the Intoxicate, and Vote is just wailing away on the Ares. Dardes himself from over the wall snags another, and now the Oni homies able to get a couple of kills.
Ooh,
Is the
nice
ultimate
shot.
good? It is. Snatty pulled back towards Nika. Stygian Torment used, doesn't matter. Solo kill for Nika on the right side of the map.
Man, Nika hit him with the cool guys don't watch, right? He just walks
He
away
knew.
and says you're going to bleed out regardless. Snatty drops the ultimate. Stygian Torment loss means that you don't have CC immunity available for the next rotation of Nika's ultimate. And look at the timing of that solo kill. Also netting Nika a blue buff invade. This is good stuff for the Oni homies early on. The exact same differential that we saw in Game 1 at this portion, just about 2,000 experience in gold both ways. And I guess this is just the new strategy of the Onis. They're just going to sacrifice Cuvo left and right, and everybody else is going to get ahead.
Miff, I got to work with you all day today. How am I going to do that when I can't trust you?
What do you
This is
mean?
hearsay. You told me that you heard the Oni homies say
I told
something,
you what I heard, man.
and that is clearly not what you.
They could have said it. They lied, all right?
You know what? They were like whispering their fake strategies out, hoping that like Samsara would hear, like, yeah, let's slow down.
When
guys.
I walk by, they yell, slow down.
Slow down, right. Right, they wanted to get a second look at you, Miff. They were talking about you slowing down.
Understood.
So they could look at you a little bit longer. Understand the feeling. Oni homies though have not slowed down their gameplay at all. Numa hovering a bit behind Shinigami right now, but more just taking a tour of the Samsara side of the map. Now Vote returns to lane. 1 kill, 1 assist in hand. Crusher fully completed on this Izanami. Things are only going to feel worse, right, as the game goes on the left side of this map. Vote, you feel fine in the early game, but Iza with that late game stim. Shinigami no good. Vote will be allowed to back, but that late game stim is just going to feel worse for Vote. Or
Oh, ma.
for Samsara, because Vote is going to be feeling good.
Yeah, Vote is ahead, is what
I'm only
Colson
halfway
is
done
saying.
with my coffee, Miff. I've been casting. I haven't been able to drink the whole thing yet. I'm getting there, I promise. I'll be better later on today. You got to work with me all day. And so I got to make it a little bit better. Oni homies in the mid lane, though. Cubo Fred looking for the
dead.
engage, but Privet pulled him. He makes his way back in to a shotgun blast of damage. And a head-scratching moment from Cubo Fred. I'm going to use my Ragnarok without beads into a pull from Privative. I think all you could do is laugh here, Miff. But Nika may be able to even things up. Stun, no good, but Circle of Protection. Drop down from Jangaru. Briz from over the wall. Oh no, Samsara suddenly finding pressure through maybe fault of the Oni homies in the mid lane. Briz suddenly has 3 kills, a killing spree for the Thoth. The long-range artillery is starting to get loaded up.
Dave, Cubo Fred broke me, man. That play was just goofy. I can't imagine what the communications for the Onis are like right now. It's just got to be like Nika like rolling his eyes like, seriously, bro?
Cubo Fred, guys, I'm engaging everyone else all at once. What?
Do you beat? No, I would blink, man. Primitive has
No,
got
that
to
was
be
an
feeling
after the
something.
fact. After the fact, they said, dude, do you have beats? And he said, no, I only have blink. It's the timing. Nobody knew what he had up to that point. What's done is done, and what's done means Briz has a killing spree going. And so the Thoth is suddenly looking a lot more threatening. Luckily for the Oni homies, Dardez also has a couple of kills in the back pocket, and so relatively mirroring one another, at least as far as gold goes, are Briz and Dardez. Build literally the exact same, and maybe a slight experience lead for Dardez out of mid as well.
Oh my God, look at the net worth. It's nearly 1,000 gold for Dardez just off rip over his opposition.
Man, I'm
in
just
Briz.
wrong, huh?
It's a full level for Dardez
Doug, you're
as well.
so good at your job. I'm talking about gold lead, and he pulls it up, and I'm just wrong.
That's the trick. Here, you want the chair 2 tips. I wait till he pulls it up
Yeah,
to
that's
start
my
talking
fault.
about it.
I'm saying, look, to my eyes, right, the builds are the same. I'm a small brain chair 1. I say what's on my screen, and the builds right now are the exact same. But Dardez will have the ability to buy a tier 1 item a little bit sooner because of the fighting that's happened around him. Unfortunately, that also means Cubo Fred has died a few times, and it's given Briz the opportunity to stay a little bit closer. And so you know, in game 1, if you're looking at Jangaru, who's still having a great game here in game 2, as a jump out from Shinigami maybe shows
Neil's
the hand
got
a
him.
little bit. Privative is close. That is going to be the double pull. Beads used by both Numa out on his belt. Shinigami intoxicated
Good
as well.
shot.
Dark Portal, it's perfect from Vote, but Shinigami has lived a little bit longer. Oh, the back
What?
down! Are you kidding me? That is absurd from Shinigami, who turns around the play. He dies nonetheless, but that is disgusting from the ADC, who's able to turn around one of these kills.
TP.
But Neoma is still in the fight. There's a teleport around the backside. The stun from Jangaru connects on to Cubo Fred. Chains are there from Privative, and the only homies are running for the hills.
Man, just the wherewithal of Shinigami saying, I'm dead here. There's no way I leap out. I have to make the play. If he doesn't hit the double bounce, if he isn't connecting the auto attack cancel, there's no way that's a kill for the Hou-Yi. Phenomenal mechanical play from Shinigami through the duo lane to turn what was a completely bleak situation, at least, into an even trade.
Good thing I finished my coffee right as that happened. But the caffeine spiked at the perfect time. This is gross. Dark Portal hits.
God, what a
The
good
silence
ult.
there as well. Oh, and
Oh my God.
You just have to play that perfectly. Oh my God. That is nuts. Cubo Fred saving some face for the Oni homies with the kill on the end there. And that's Vote. You know, Vote does everything he can there. That is just a mechanical play from Shinigami to pull something back. And Miff, you know, all last year, Hou-Yi was memed as like the unwinning ADC. Plays like that maybe make that pick a little bit more worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, how do you predict just 800 of your HP immediately evaporating before your eyes? It's so hard to do, especially considering Hou-Yi's actually got a decent matchup into Vote. Worth noting that Vote, when he was leapt on, was actually invisible, but Mark of the Crow from Shinigami reveals that invisibility. Vote just unsafe.
Up and over the Spirit Ball, it's Cubo Fred. This time it looks like the Ragnarok a little bit better, but Privative has not died.
Still
I've
alive.
cursed you, my friend. I'm sorry, Cubo Fred dies. Neoma jumps in, and it's these like last-minute return kills for the Oni homies that have just been keeping things even, but SAMSARA have looked more clean at the beginning of these fights. It's going to be a lopsided trade yet again, and Shinigami starting to warm up in game 2. The Hou-Yi is on a killing spree.
Man, Snatty has been in every single one of these engagements. Nika just hasn't rotated. That's the difference that Teleport has made. And in doing so, SAMSARA now pull the Cold Fury.
Do we get a 2 versus 4 play here from
Rough.
the Oni homies?
Oh my
You've got
God.
artillery range,
Oh, see
Dardas
ya.
with the tick damage, and the Fury not stolen away, confirmed by SAMSARA. But the carries of the Oni homies now seeing blood. It's a dash in from Dardas. Vote finding the auto attacks. Aegis, well timed to
No
avoid a lot
way.
of damage. Shinigami auto trades
Okay.
down with Vote, and both hunters fall. But now Dardas left alone, needs the abilities, has
Oh,
damage
bye.
on the Priv. Dardas makes a big play, 403 for the Agni.
And Nika has finally made the rotation over to this side of the map. Maybe the Oni homies aren't done just yet. Purple Buff Invade is good, but they do not have eyes on Briz. Nika hunting Jangaru in the jungle. Maybe it's Cubo Fred that finds him.
Cubo Fred invading the red. Spirit Ball flies in. I would say if there's a Spirit Ball hit rate on Cubo Fred specifically,
It's all of them.
it's every single one so far. And it might be Cubo Fred's fault. It feels like he's been jumping into a lot of them so far this game. And we joke, but really the Ragnaroks just haven't found the value yet for the Oni homies. At the beginning of that fight, Cubo finds a target and then ends up dying for his troubles anyway. It's like this collapse from SAMSARA where Jangaru dispels, Briz roots, shotgun blasts from the final. Like all this damage on the return engage from SAMSARA feels like it's just been consistent. We got a battle here, Mifflin. 4-2-1 for Shinigami, mirroring out a lot of what Vote
my God,
has
the
put out in
close.
the Let my storyline go, Doug.
Doug, take a break, man. Come on.
Stop being so good at your job. Dardas at 403. I think the point, though, is the resiliency of the SAMSARA team, because Doug is absolutely correct. Golden experience out of control right now for the Oni homies, but that has not slowed down SAMSARA. SAMSARA
Double
continues
knockup.
to look for fights, and so does Neuma.
Triple stun.
Stun on the other end from Dardas, and this Agni just firing from range. Nobody from
Cubo's
SAMSARA
in.
has been able to return engage. Cubo Fred, Ragnarok, that'll pull Briz right into the back.
Good stuff.
And this is why Doug is showing us the gold lead, because the Oni homies seemingly can do no wrong. It's a kill onto Briz, and as 5 Oni homies will group up on the other end of this fight.
Privative re-engages, dropped low, as
There
is
you go.
Snatty. Both removed from the map by Nika. What can the 2 remaining members do from SAMSARA? Hopefully escape. Jangaru forced to use the Aegis, and it's the Oni homies just throwing their weight around on the map. It's just a W key style. Nika makes his first rotation at the 13-minute mark and is now running the map.
I guess that's the difference, right? Is you're finally having Nika rotate into this fight. a high kill game. We got 21 kills in 16 minutes. Then finally a Fire Giant, I say finally, we're 16 minutes in. An early Fire Giant, by all regards, goes down. It's the ONI homies with good calculated objective play on the back end of a big fight. There's the gold lead right done. I'm not making a point about SAMSARA still being in this game. 6.7K for the ONI homies in gold, 12,000 in experience.
That's a lot.
And this is the moment in game one where things really started to roll downhill. Is that a good thing or a bad? If you're the ONI homies and things are rolling downhill, that's good because you're picking up speed, and I'm sticking with it. Doesn't feel great if you lose your Fire Giant buff on Dardes, though, right away. That's a big pick for SAMSARA to grab a kill, but Neil Mamif, he's looking to fight.
Shinigami forced to use the beads early on, but that should spell the end of it. Those chains and the Spirit Ball should be enough to disengage, unless Nika's got something to say about it, and I think he does.
Nika's had a lot to say about a lot so far this game. Bastet Ultimate will not be sent.
Hesitant.
I think Jangaru has gotten max value out of that Stone of Binding on the on the E-set so far this game. It feels like Spirit Ball after Spirit Ball has just been there. But SAMSARA is going to need a lot more than that Stone of Binding to keep this ONI homies push at bay. But without Dardes for 15 seconds, that's burnt decent amount of time off this Fire Giant buff.
It has, but how the ONI homies are approaching this siege is a very good way to kind of like mitigate the loss of Dardes. Essentially, in a split push situation, it's going to force SAMSARA to at least group up on 2 different spots on the map. Seems like they're not putting up any defense on this tier 2, despite it only being 3 members of the ONI homies. We had Nika pushing up mid, which is going to drag Brizz's attention away as well. But in doing so, SAMSARA dedicate their time to the right-hand side of the map. They push up the waves all the way to the tier 1, taking it out with minions. But I don't think the ONI homies are too concerned with the right-hand side. They want this tier 2 and mid, and even potentially a Phoenix. Still, plenty of time to play with this Fire Giant, 2 entire minutes on the buff. You don't necessarily need to get a Phoenix with this siege, considering how early they pick up the Fire Giant. Tier 2, back up to Primal Fury. I'm sure the ONI homies are very happy with that.
Miff, it's unfortunate, and this is purely a fabricated storyline, that Dardes doesn't like playing. He doesn't like playing mages, but
we can ask him.
We can ask him. You're right. We can confirm the yes or no at that at a later date. If he does hate it, it's unfortunate because he's so good at it. 415 on the Agni, 10,000 player damage in this game. He's gone flat pen into the Void Stone. Feels like we've been seeing a lot of Void Stone. No, maybe not a lot, but more than I'd expect.
Agreed.
In some of the mid laners here this week. I think Moswell built Void Stone on Zeus yesterday. Obviously, you get some power in there, which feels nice. And then maybe Soul Reaver kind of bridges that gap and really spikes up your damage. But damage hasn't been lacking, Void Stone or not, for Dardes.
No, and take a peek at Jangaru's build. Look at both of these junglers' builds, actually. Damage, not a concern. Bruiser for both of them. Jangaru getting a couple of Bruiser items. Spear Desolation, really the main bulk of his damage. And Cubo Fred, I guess, just decided, hey, if I'm going to be the sacrificial lamb every time, maybe I mess around and survive a couple of these engagements. Gets the breastplate, or the Shogun's Kansari, rather, as well as the disruption factor of the cloak. So I guess if you're going to have Cubo Fred act as the engage every single time, he's probably going to survive a couple of these fights from here on out. I was curious to see which bow he was going to pick up. It's actually the Silver Branch. It's a phenomenal stat stick, especially in a god like Fenrir. His damage output, nothing to be scoffed at this point. He might even legitimately be able to take some 1v1s up against some guys like Shinigami, even potentially Jangaru with that Seething Howl, giving you additional power as well. The ONI homies in a very good position to keep playing with their lead.
They sure are. And with that lead, the ONI homies make their way towards right. That'll be a tier 2 tower going down. Every ultimate in the game ready to go. All the relics also ready to go. So we're going into what could be the final fight of this matchup 20 minutes in. Fully stocked up, and fully stocked up feels infinitely better if you're the ONI homies right now. But we have seen it's the playmaking of SAMSARA that has kept our eyebrows just a little raised so far this game, as Cubo Fred sends the shrine right back towards his side of the map. SAMSARA can't get anything going for themselves, not even a shrine. Jangaru, Wind Gus on back, but Nika just casually ticks down about half of his HP. I guess Cubo Fred Myth opened up to a little bit more of a bruiser build when Nika is supplying plenty of damage with his build. It is jungle and solo lane build effectively flipped here for the ONI homies. And, you know, Nika, I imagine enjoying playing a different style of role here. given how his KDA has gone 3-1-1, and the Bastet hasn't had much of an answer from SAMSARA.
No, he's just walking up and applying damage at every single opportunity. The full tanks of SAMSARA really are struggling to contend with the damage output that Nika's got already.
That's something you would do, Miff. Like, you're playing ranked.
Are you talking about like me specifically, or just like
No, you
like
you
the
specifically.
royal you? Okay.
Like you queue jungle, I assume. But like you get slotted into solo. You just pick an assassin and build full damage anyway, right?
No, I would never roll dodge, if you would. I'm more of a...
Well, Nika's not roll dodging that. He's playing his role,
Look,
right?
I do what I'm told, man. I load into ranked.
That is not true.
Whatever Fire Mage
I can't
X3
believe
tells
that
me
just
to do.
came out of your mouth.
I lock in. I'm at like 1500 MMR, man. That hard reset really hit me hard. I don't know what I'm doing out there.
Caleb, I do what I'm told. The Mifflins, that is not true. Nope.
You know, I guarantee you, like, nobody knew my name was Caleb until you just said that. You actually exposed me. That's messed up.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a way around this. But
I've never once said your name on cast. That's messed up, dude.
Everyone know. We use my real name more than my like tag. I
All
think.
right, David.
I'm like full David makes me feel like I'm in trouble though, and I might be after the way that parts of this cast have gone. We'll see.
Check our text from Hindu.
Yeah, no, for real. Hindu blowing us up right now. ONI homies blowing SAMSARA out of the water in game number 2. Could be one final fight, and this could be how it starts. Snatty,
where'd he go?
With a desperate ultimate. Will fall down to the grave. Cubo Fred with the brutalize around the Aegis. Finds a second for the ONI homies, and it's got to be a play
Massive
from one of the
ults.
carries. Good pull from Privative, but I'm not sure it's enough here, Mifflin. Cubo Fred's lost his HP. Neoma has as well, but the ONI homies stand strong as 5. Shinigami, you made a play on the left side of the map. You need a miracle here to keep the ONI homies at bay.
Hey, Shinigami is no stranger to miracles so far this game. Harken back to that kill on Vote. Now he just has to do it against 5 members. Best of luck to him.
Without ult
Hey,
or relics.
the beads are burned, at least. Privative before, with
No
his
minions.
dying breath, takes
Wow.
out 4 sets of beads.
No minions.
I guess the ONI homies, they want the Fire Giant.
ONI homies will back away.
Is that
the
true?
FG. Well, yeah, look who's standing on the other side of the feet. It's Shinigami.
Yeah.
I don't want to siege against that.
Do you
no
know what that
chance.
stands for? Do you know what that means?
No.
It's Japanese for Death God.
Really?
It really is.
It makes sense this game.
Yeah.
My man is going nuts. 4-2-2 on the Hoyi, and the presence of Shinigami has forced the ONI homies back. We're going to ignore the fact that there were no waves and they didn't want to tank it, things like that. We'll just say it was Shinigami standing there. And so the ONI homies grab.
I think it's Death God.
Yeah, I really hope you're. I mean, I'm just taking your word for it.
So the chat's blowing me up, dude. I'm not good at it.
I don't know. I trust you with this sort of stuff, Miff. I
Yeah, I
would
watch a
trust
lot of anime.
Nika to do enough damage to Briz. Can he get out, though? That's the question. Aegis used. No, we've seen this more than once this game. A jump in, met with a spirit ball, and then met with a kill. A smile on the face of Nika. But that's 1 Fire Giant buff down and 50 seconds without Nika. I'm sure, Miff, though, the remaining 4 members of the ONI homies would take their chances against the 4 remaining members of SAMSARA.
Yeah, luckily, though, Briz won't have to walk anywhere when he respawns. Faster than Nika, by the way, because he's slightly lower level. So it's going to be a long time for Nika to get back involved in this engagement. You got to add that travel time. I think it takes about 15 seconds to walk from one side of the map to the other. So this could legitimately slow down the ONI homies a lot. SAMSARA now given a little bit more time to farm back up. It's not as if they're wildly behind in the XP department. You can only hit level 20 once, so most of SAMSARA are starting to approach that critical tipping point. Relic's starting to get finished up as well, approaching that 6-item slot. If the ONI homies keep going for these wild individual plays, if Nika is going to slow down the squad, eventually SAMSARA will be able to fight back in. And I think now is legitimately a good opportunity for it. Remember back, Privative burns 4 sets of beads at the exact same time. You can see it reflected in the relic column of the ONI homies, 20 seconds left on each of those beads. Could be an opportunity in the next 20 seconds for Privative to go do it again.
You're right, Miff. Yeah, there's a small window
Let him do it, man.
where Privative could walk out, find a pull, something like that on the ONI homies, who are slowly playing this Fire Giant buff. 2 minutes remaining on the buff itself. No more Tier 2 towers remaining. And so it's a Phoenix line defense from SAMSARA. And we saw plenty of moments yesterday where...
10.5 hours of moments.
You're right, 10.5 hours of moments where our
Said that
eyebrows were a
weird.
little raised under Phoenix sieges, where a team that was like this far in the lead maybe got repelled once or twice. And in a week like this, you can't take any chances, right? You're playing for both of these teams, but for the ONI homies, you're playing to get your spot in the SPL back. SAMSARA wants to join the SPL for the first time. You cannot make mistakes in moments like this. You need to be calculated regardless of how far ahead you are in the gold lead. Final judgment charge, but sent right to the back pocket by Briz. So you got a minute and 15 seconds left on this FG buff, Miff, and Minion Wave's right about halfway there.
Nearly full strength for both of these teams. Every single ultimate available. Only relics used are Primitive's Bracer, as well as the Aegis for Nika. So both squads fighting at full strength means that SAMSARA, with the unofficial 6-man on the Phoenix and the ability to keep these waves at bay, have a chance.
It's a blink in, and it's Cubo Fred who does it, but there's a silence on the other end, and it's immediate jump out. It's a 3 versus 2. Oh, but the ultimate from Nika connects, and Jangaru pulled back into the mid lane. And a 3 versus 3 on left results in the ONI homies knocking down the Phoenix. And so onto the mid lane we go. Jangaru gone for 45.
And Fire Giant still has 30 seconds to play with. If SAMSARA could just hold on a little bit longer, could be one way back in.
Primitive has chains on 3, but he has no health to follow up. Vote walks into the base of SAMSARA. The ONI homies look like they will delay no further. Minion Wave is here. And the ONI homies in their first set of the week will knock down SAMSARA in 2-0 fashion. And the ONI homies are coming for their spot.
Man, the ONI homie, it's just a difference of experience, I think. The ability to farm up throughout the early game, the macro play, really is what propelled them into a lot of these early objectives, a lot of these team fight wins. Game 1, it was just the macro play. They were losing out in the majority of early team fights. Game 2, get some of that rust off. It's been a little while since we got to see them play last. Team fight started looking good. Macro play stayed equally good. Just the ability to farm, that veteranship rearing its head here in this set.
Look, they expected that the ONI home, I mean, far and away, you talk about all week long, you know, everyone at home talking about who do we expect to make it out. ONI homies were always, it was like
their first seed for a
feels
reason.
Like everyone is fighting for one more spot in the SPL, right? That's what the conversations have felt like. And so this result was expected, but I think if I'm anyone in the lower bracket right now for the rest of this week, you know, even though the gold lead got kind of out of hand, the individual playmaking of SAMSARA gives you maybe a little bit of concern. SAMSARA has shown that even against the ONI homies, even against SPL talent from last year, this SAMSARA team can make some stuff happen. So watch out, losers bracket, lower bracket. SAMSARA is coming for you. That's our first set of the day. ONI homies take it 2-0. We'll head to a break. When we come back, the desk will break it down.
You can call it losers bracket.
Welcome back. Set number 1 is done, and it's the ONI homies who come out on top. Though a bit of a long-winded game there, as it took them nearly 28 minutes to finally close that one out. Kind of similar tale that we saw in game number 1, where it's great farming out of the ONI homies to kind of keep them in early. SAMSARA, great fighting, especially out of Shinigami over on that left-hand side. I mean, that triple pounce, that kind of broke Mifflin at the start of that game there. And just constant great fighting and great plays out of there. But at the end of the day, it is the ONI homies, the veteran experience of the former SPL team that comes out on top.
And realistically, you got to see this game, like you said, very similar patterns overall to game 1, except this time around, there were a lot more fights from the ONI homies, and they were a lot more consistent and wins for them overall. So you get all this crazy good farm, and then it transitions into really good team fights, and then it transitions into Nika just built full damage, and he's Bastet, and he's having the time of his life at the very end of the game. Yeah, it looked really good for them, and it makes a friendly reminder as to why they are the top seed in this tournament. But I will say, and I have to give SAMSARA the shout-outs, because there were moments, I think if they were able to figure out some of the farm game and slow down the ONI homies essentially just nuts gold spooling that they had going throughout that entire game, then I think there's a lot more chances for them to have an equal fight in a lot of these opportunities. And maybe we're looking at a different set, but each game, you know, they start getting into these fights and it's 2,000, 3,000 gold down all of a sudden. And the ONI homies just looked cleaner throughout this one as well. It just made it even easier for them to capitalize on that gold lead and extend it even further. I mean, even here, you're looking at 14,000 gold lead 20 minutes in.
I mean, during that play specifically, there's one big highlight I want to throw there, which is to Primitive, which he got the most unfortunate Ares treatment of his life, which is I just chained 4 or 5 people with my ultimate and then ended up getting everybody's beads and only ended up pulling like the Bacchus in at that point. I mean, it's the dream of an Ares to get a pull like that, but unfortunately, everybody still had their beads up. I mean, Cuvo Fred is just W-King as this tanky Fenrir. And you have Nika over here in the side lane who's supposed to be a solo laner, the one building tanky. He's the one who's built basically full glass cannon. I remember turning over to you at one point when we were watching this game going, isn't Nika supposed to be the solo laner? Why does this guy have full damage Bastet?
Because Cuvo has like all these tank items, and it was like, that's to make up so that he can go in and Nika can do whatever carry things. He took over the jungle. He's the jungler now.
There was one point where we even looked up, and I had to point out, and it confused both of us to no end. There was a silver branch bow built on Cuvo Fred. I wish I could ask him why in the world this is there. I can only imagine it's just because it's such a powerful stat stick, because when we look down the list of items that a Fenrir of all gods is going to build traditionally, Silver Branch is not at the top of that list.
It's not in my top 10 even. It's
20?
not. It is. I think I looked at you and I said it's just an item that has literally never occurred to me to think about on a Fenrir before. But it doesn't matter because it won, and that's I think at the end of the day all like stat wise for Fenrir when he's bought Silver Branch bow he's got a win rate. It's 100%.
Hey, remember how like 630 whatever GPM was good? Well, how about a 664 out of Nika?
That's better.
That's a pretty good GPM.
Yeah.
And we also got Nika standing by so we can talk to him, not just about the GPM, but as the set as a whole. Nika, they stand by for the post-game interview. First off, congrats on your win.
Thank you.
Game number 1, you know, we were coming out here expecting, you know, a bunch of fighting, a bunch of smite, but instead we got Farm Simulator out of your team there in game 1.
Yeah, I mean, we just knew that they would try and make the game scrappy just from the first set we saw, and as long as we didn't fall into that trap and made sure we got leads through lanes, we'd be fine. I mean, there was some point where they had a 6 kill lead, but Daughters was 4 levels up, I was 2 levels up. I think at the end of the day, you could play for kills and have more fun, or you could just play it smart and win slowly, you know.
Yeah, well, you guys did get that slow win there in game 1, a bit slow win in game 2 as well. And kind of talking about game 2, did you really just want to be jungle that game or something on this full damage Bastet?
That's just how you have to play the god. Bastet does not work any other way. I've spoke to Scream about it, so I mean, if he says it, that's how you got to do it.
Well, there you go, going with the full damage there. You guys finally got your first, kind of big competitive set after, your loss out in Season 8. How does it feel kind of being reunited here now in Season 9, getting to play together again?
It feels good. I mean, our practice has been really solid. I don't think we showed, our best sets today for sure. I think it was a really messy performance from us based on how we've been practicing, but everything's been going really well. We're all loving playing together as always, and yeah, feeling good.
Well, you guys are looking good so far here in your first set. Congrats on your win. I'll let you get back to celebrate with the guys. That way you guys get ready for your next matchup.
Thank you.
Always fun out there. Very interesting thing to point is that's just how you have to play Bastet. You know, I'm not going to disagree with that statement. When you build Bastet,
Yeah.
she's damage. Even maybe more so now than she ever was before. Just a lot of damage, but only homies out here having a lot of fun, having some good games, and getting a nice initial showcase of what we can maybe expect from them for the remainder of this weekend.
And I will doubly not disagree with it because if Scream said it, it was like,
Ooh.
Scream's like the Bible for Bastet, so you just trust what it is.
That's true.
I think, and you get another good performance. Like, again, if they're saying that even wasn't their cleanest play, and admittedly, we've seen some of their clean play last year, so we know that it wasn't exactly the exact cleanest that they can get. I'm excited to see what this team has to offer for the rest of the tournament. They get to kind of coast right now up in the upper bracket still and feel pretty happy with where they're positioned because I think now they're at the rate where they only need 2 more set wins and they can make it back to the SPL.
Yeah, I believe it is just 2 more wins that the ONI homies need in order to reclaim the title of potentially ONI Warriors. Although I still think it would be hilarious if they decide to go with the Valkyries just for the fun, just to really mess with our brains there. But ONI homies just a couple set wins away. SAMSARA, even though they lose this set, they are not out quite yet because they do have many more to come now that they have dropped down into that lower bracket and still looking strong out here. I think that's kind of the important thing to highlight from this set is even though SAMSARA lost, they have shown that they can take these early fights. They're willing to fight 4, 6, 10,000 gold down and still look fairly competitive, Gore.
And I think what we're about to see, because the next set has Winter Dogs in it, and it'll be our first look at them in a couple of months as well. I think we're going to see that. We're going to get to see nobody's favorites. We're going to see SAMSARA. Like, we're going to see 3 teams that I think are a lot closer. Maybe even they're, throw them in with Duck Club as well. All of a sudden, you've got 4 teams that are very, very equally viable for that spot, and all of which could take on the ONI homies. And on a bad day for the ONI homies and a great day for them, potentially steal their spot away as well. So going into the next few days, I think there is a kind of rising pressure, not just on some of these teams to perform, but realistically, a lot of excitement for what we can watch based on how these teams are performing now.
I think one of the teams that I've been most interested in seeing how they've improved from Season 8 into 9 has been the Winter Dogs, and we'll get to see them next up against nobody's favorites. The matchup of Benny Q versus El Leon in the mid lane is probably one of my most anticipated ones here this weekend. The winner of that match will go on to face the Duck Club. So we have ONI homies and Fun Havers will be the next big matchup on the winner side bracket whenever those teams play out here. But Winter Dogs, nobody's favorite. Again, winner goes on to play Duck Club, another squad of former SPL talent, whether it was very recent or kind of back in the old days like Moswell, Snoopy there. So I'm very curious about this matchup, and then obviously the winners after there, because this is a very competitive 4 teams that we're going to have at the top side there in the winners bracket. And then when we get down to the lower, it's going to get really contentious.
Well, especially when you consider some of the teams that have moved forward and where they were seated, but also just the players that are on them and how we've seen them perform yesterday. Adding that into a lower bracket where it's like, okay, now pressure's on, lose and you go home, they're going to dial it up. And that's a little more frightening, I think, for everybody that is going to be down there. For me, it's just entertaining. I'm excited to be able to watch what they have to offer. And that comes like into mind. I mean, later today we have some Elim matches. I'm really excited to see what some of these teams do with their backs against the wall.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the big thing in these double eliminations is, top side of the bracket, you play a little bit riskier because you want to try and go for those crazy things. You want to see what you're able to get away with up against some of these teams. But then when you get to the lower bracket, that's when you pull out your big guns. That's when you really hunker down. And we'll get to see some of those later on in the day. But we got the ONI, or not the ONI homies. We just watched them. We got the Winter Dogs and nobody's favorite up next, coming up right after our break.